You made the right decision.
Thank you.
For this dress.
What did I not make the right decision for?
I don't know.
Shayla.
We're hoping you did.
I'm questioning if we are even the right fit to get married.
This is bull. I can't believe that she have the balls to say that to
Slipping
me.
into this like miserable, depressed person because he's afraid of me. He's afraid of messing up. And probably because I'm not happy. So he's saying, okay, well, if she's not happy, I'm not going to be happy.
Hoping you made the right decision. That you love him for him, not
What do you think I love him for? His money?
Sex?
That's what she said. Well, that's number 2 on the priority.
There you go.
Couple. It's not just her. It's me too, you know? So I need more. I demand more because I know my value.
I have come to New York City this week because I have to work. And I've come alone because I really needed some space to be apart from Edward.
I feel that you are so cold to me. I'm begging for love. And this is not acceptable for me at all.
I feel like we have nothing to talk about. I feel like there's no stimulation.
This is not the point. This is not the point. I give you exactly what you need.
Edward did not leave the Dominican Republic expecting life in America to be easy. He knew Marissa had 2 children. He knew she had a demanding career. He knew her family might question whether he belonged in their world. And he knew that moving countries would temporarily take away much of his independence. But he probably never expected the person making him feel least welcome would be the woman he came to marry. For weeks, Edward has been trying to enter a life that was already completely built before he arrived. It is Marissa's house, her schedule, her parenting routine, her social circle, her expectations. Even the wedding appears to exist mostly inside her world. Edward is expected to adjust quickly, contribute immediately, and somehow understand rules that nobody clearly explained. Then Marissa becomes frustrated when he hesitates. Now she has gone to New York because she says she needs space from him. And while Edward sits in Pennsylvania wondering why his fiancé has become so emotionally cold, Marissa tells her friends she's only 75% sure she wants to marry him. That number changes the entire story. Edward has already made a 100% commitment. He left his home, his work, his family, and the life he understood because he believed they were building a future together. But Marissa is still deciding whether she even wants that future. And when Edward finally travels to New York, he does not demand a wedding. He does not beg her to choose him. He asks for affection, consideration, and basic respect. For the first time, Edward stops trying to prove he deserves a place in Marissa's life. Instead, he starts questioning whether Marissa deserves everything he has sacrificed. That is why this confrontation is much bigger than another relationship argument. This is the moment their entire power dynamic begins to change. And judging by Marissa's reaction, she was not prepared for Edward to finally understand his own value. Marissa's decision to travel to New York alone was already a warning sign. Needing personal space is not automatically wrong. Healthy couples should be able to spend time apart without treating it like a crisis. But context changes everything. Edward is not a long-time husband with his own job, car, friends, and established routine in Pennsylvania. He is a recent arrival who left his entire support system behind. He cannot simply go spend the weekend with old friends. He cannot return to his normal workplace. He cannot escape into a familiar routine while Marissa clears her head. His normal life is thousands of miles away. So when Marissa leaves for another city and describes Edward's communication as pressure, he is left in an extremely vulnerable position. She gets space. Edward gets isolation. And that difference matters. Then Marissa attends her final wedding dress fitting. On the surface, the scene should represent excitement. The dress is ready. The wedding is approaching. Her friends are there to celebrate. But emotionally, Marissa appears more excited about the dress than the person she is supposed to marry. That contrast tells us a lot. She can enjoy the planning, the appearance, and the event while still feeling deeply uncertain about the relationship underneath it. The dress makes her smile. Talking about Edward immediately brings the tension back. And when her friends question whether she is making the right decision, Marissa admits she is only about 75% sure. She also admits she is unhappy. But then she says something even more revealing. She recognizes that Edward is becoming unhappy too. Marissa says he is turning into a miserable, depressed version of himself because he is afraid of upsetting her. That admission should stop viewers in their tracks, because it means Marissa sees the emotional environment Edward is living inside. She knows he is walking on eggshells. She knows he is constantly afraid of making another mistake. She knows her unhappiness is changing his personality, but recognizing the pattern is not the same as accepting responsibility for it. Marissa describes Edward's sadness almost like it is another problem he brought into the relationship. She does not fully consider that his sadness may be a reaction to feeling rejected every day. That is a major difference. Edward is not simply unhappy because Marissa is busy. He is unhappy because he no longer feels wanted. And once someone begins feeling unwanted inside a relationship they sacrificed everything to build, even small moments become emotionally enormous. Before Edward travels to New York, he explains that Marissa left without even giving him a hug goodbye. A missing hug might sound minor, but when affection is already disappearing, one missing hug can represent the entire relationship. Edward feels like he is constantly reaching toward Marissa. Marissa keeps moving farther away. He wants reassurance that they are still partners. She experiences that request as another responsibility, and that creates the cycle viewers have watched building for weeks. Edward senses distance, so he asks for affection. Marissa feels pressured, so she withdraws. Edward becomes more anxious because she has withdrawn. Then Marissa uses his anxiety as proof that he is too needy. The more Edward asks for closeness, the more Marissa demands space. And the more space she demands, the more insecure he becomes. Eventually, both people start blaming the other person's reaction while ignoring what created it. But Edward finally does something different. He goes to New York and changes the language of their relationship. Earlier in the season, Edward seemed focused almost entirely on keeping Marissa happy. He tried to follow her household rules. He tried to connect with her children. He tried to impress her family. He tried to adapt to a completely different lifestyle. He even made deeply personal changes because he believed they would improve the relationship. His main question appeared to be, what do I need to do so Marissa accepts me? But in New York, Edward asks a completely different question. What do I need from Marissa? That is the real turning point. He tells her she has become cold. He says he feels like he is begging for love. Then he says the line many viewers had been waiting to hear. He knows his value. That statement sounds simple, but it changes everything. Unequal relationships often survive because one person becomes the judge, while the other becomes the applicant. Marissa has repeatedly evaluated whether Edward is responsible enough, independent enough, sophisticated enough, helpful enough, and socially acceptable enough. Edward has spent most of the season trying to pass those tests. But when he says he knows his value, he rejects Marissa's position as the only person allowed to judge the relationship. He is no longer asking whether he is good enough for her. He is asking whether she is treating him well enough to keep him. And Marissa does not seem comfortable with that shift. She is comfortable telling Edward what he needs to improve. But the moment Edward explains what he needs, she becomes defensive. That contradiction has been sitting underneath their relationship from the beginning. Marissa expects Edward to understand her need for space, but she struggles to respect his need for reassurance. She expects him to notice household responsibilities without being told, but she interprets his attempts to communicate as dependence. She wants him to act independently, but he is living inside a system where she controls almost everything. And here is where this story becomes more complicated. Edward is not completely free from responsibility. He is an adult entering a home with children. Marissa should not need to explain every basic responsibility forever. A smaller group of viewers understands her frustration. They know how exhausting it feels to carry the mental load inside a household. Marissa has a demanding career. She is raising children. She is planning a wedding. She is managing the emotional damage of a previous marriage. She may have hoped Edward's arrival would make life easier. Instead, she may feel like she gained another person who needs instructions. That concern deserves a fair discussion. But there is a huge difference between asking a partner for help and creating hidden tests. If Marissa needs Edward to handle a specific responsibility, she needs to say it clearly. She cannot keep the expectation vague, criticize him for misunderstanding, and then use his hesitation as proof that he is incompetent. Because that pattern creates paralysis. Marissa sets an expectation. Edward tries to follow it. The standard remains unclear or changes afterward. Edward becomes afraid of doing the wrong thing. Marissa criticizes him for lacking initiative. Then he becomes even more cautious. Eventually, Edward starts waiting for permission because acting independently feels dangerous. And Marissa sees that hesitation as evidence that he cannot function without her. That is how criticism can create the exact behavior someone claims to hate. The "have a good night" text is one of the clearest examples. Marissa says she was busy in New York and did not communicate with Edward throughout the day. Later, He sent her a message saying, "Have a good night." Marissa interpreted that message as anger, sarcasm, and passive aggression. Now, Edward may have been frustrated. That is possible. But based on what viewers were shown, the message itself was not openly hostile. Marissa appears to read ordinary behavior through the assumption that Edward is already causing a problem. Once that happens, neutral actions start looking suspicious. A short message becomes manipulation. A request for affection becomes neediness. A serious conversation becomes an attack on her space. Edward believes he is trying to repair the relationship. Marissa believes his attempts to repair it are part of the problem. That leaves him in an impossible position. If he stays away, she may say he does not care. If he approaches her, she says he cannot respect space. If he asks for affection, she says she cannot provide it because the relationship is tense. But if all affection disappears, how is the tension supposed to improve? And this is where Marissa's history matters. Her fear of marriage did not appear out of nowhere. She has spoken about experiencing a painful first marriage and divorce. She once reached the point where she believed she would never marry again. That emotional history deserves compassion. The K1 process also forced them to make major decisions under a serious deadline. They may not have had enough ordinary time together before Edward's move. Vacation chemistry does not automatically predict domestic compatibility. In Punta Cana, Edward's relaxed personality may have felt exciting. He was affectionate, easygoing, and different from the stressful world Marissa normally managed. He may have represented freedom, but inside her Pennsylvania routine, those same qualities appear to frustrate her. His relaxed nature becomes a lack of ambition. His need for guidance becomes another responsibility. His affection becomes pressure. His unfamiliarity with her household becomes incompetence. That is the deeper contradiction. Marissa may have fallen in love with the escape Edward represented, but now she resents him for not immediately fitting into the structured life she wanted to escape. She chose his differences. Then she started punishing him for those same differences. And this is where the power imbalance becomes impossible to ignore. Marissa has the house, the income, the career, the family connections, the familiar environment, the transportation, the household authority, the wedding arrangements. Almost every practical advantage belongs to her. Edward arrives with much less immediate power. He does not have the same ability to work, travel independently, build a social circle, or leave whenever the atmosphere becomes uncomfortable. If the relationship ends, Marissa still has her home, career, children, friends, and established life. Edward faces a much more uncertain future. That does not make him helpless. And it does not mean Marissa must tolerate behavior she considers unacceptable. But it means her criticism carries more weight. Edward is not receiving complaints from an equal partner standing on familiar ground. He is receiving them from the person controlling nearly every part of his current stability. Now add Marissa's family to that pressure. Edward is not only trying to satisfy his fiancé. He has also been trying to prove himself to her mother, her friends, her children, and her former husband. There is always another question surrounding him. Can Edward fit into this lifestyle? Can he help raise the children? Can he communicate properly with Marissa's social circle? Can he become the type of man her family believes belongs beside her? But viewers are beginning to ask the opposite question. Can Marissa create an environment where Edward has a fair chance to succeed? Entering a new culture is already difficult. Entering a family where everyone appears ready to evaluate you makes it even harder. Marissa may believe she is helping Edward by coaching him. She may think she is protecting him from embarrassment. But on screen, that coaching often looks more like correction than support. There is a major difference between saying, "This is how we normally handle things," and saying, "You should already know this, and your failure proves something about you." One approach teaches. The other humiliates. That is why so many viewers have become strongly sympathetic toward Edward. Online discussions celebrated the moment he finally stood up for himself. Many viewers called him the more emotionally mature partner. Others urged him to leave before the relationship completely destroys his confidence. The phrase "Free Edward" started appearing because a large part of the audience believes he is trapped inside a system where nothing he does will ever be enough. Many viewers also feel Marissa speaks to Edward like an employee, a child, or a project she is trying to improve. They question how he can take initiative when she has not clearly explained the rules and often corrects him after he makes a decision. A section of the audience believes Edward's dependence is temporary. They argue that once he can work, drive more freely, build friendships, and create his own routine, he may appear far more confident. That possibility cannot be ignored. Marissa is judging Edward during the most dependent stage of his immigration experience. She may be treating a temporary situation as a permanent character flaw, but the audience is not completely united. Some fans believe Edward does appear to wait for instructions. They think Marissa is exhausted from managing work, children, wedding planning, and a new partner. They also believe Edward may have underestimated the responsibility of becoming a stepfather. That is a fair criticism. Love alone does not prepare someone to manage a household. Edward must eventually show that he can become a reliable partner, not only an affectionate one. But even many viewers who understand Marissa's frustration still criticize her delivery. Feeling overwhelmed does not justify contempt. Needing help does not justify making a partner feel stupid. Questioning the wedding does not justify waiting until after an international relocation to reveal the full depth of those doubts. Marissa has also spoken more positively about Edward outside the episode. She has said he helps her relax when stress increases her anxiety. That suggests their complete relationship may contain warmth viewers are not seeing. Reality television is edited. Hours of interaction are reduced into a few dramatic minutes. Producers focus on tension because tension creates conversation. So viewers should be careful about declaring one person completely good and the other completely terrible. But editing cannot invent every word. The audience is still reacting to real statements, real expressions, and repeated patterns shown across multiple episodes. Even if warmer moments were removed, the cold moments still happened. One popular fan theory is that Marissa loved the vacation version of Edward, but dislikes the domestic version. On vacation, Edward represented freedom. He was charming, relaxed, affectionate, and separated from everyday responsibility. In America, he became connected to chores, parenting, schedules, immigration limits, and wedding pressure. Another section of the audience believes Marissa does not truly doubt Edward. They think she doubts her own ability to surrender control after surviving a painful marriage. Marriage requires uncertainty. It requires trusting another person with decisions, emotions, children, money, and future plans. Marissa has created a life where she controls most important variables. Edward introduces unpredictability. And unpredictability may be what actually frightens her. But fear of losing control can easily become controlling behavior. Marissa may correct Edward because correction makes her feel safer. The problem is that Edward cannot build confidence inside an environment where every mistake becomes evidence against him. And now he appears to be reaching his limit. His decision to travel to New York proves he was still trying to save the relationship. He did not arrive demanding that Marissa marry him immediately. He came asking for connection. He wanted to explain that he could no longer accept being treated with emotional coldness. But Marissa responded by saying they might not be the right fit for marriage. That revelation blindsided him. From Edward's perspective, he is trying to solve the distance while Marissa is considering ending everything. Then she admits that even while planning the wedding and paying deposits, she keeps wondering whether the wedding will happen. Edward's anger is understandable. He has already relocated. He cannot return the emotional cost of that decision. He cannot simply recover the exact life he paused. So when Marissa says she may not want the marriage, Edward hears more than normal cold feet. He hears that she allowed him to make a life-changing commitment while keeping one foot outside the relationship. But the biggest issue between Edward and Marissa is not only delayed honesty. It is respect. Does Marissa respect Edward as he currently exists? Not the future Edward who has a job, understands every household routine, impresses her friends, and never needs reassurance. The Edward standing in front of her now. Because marriage cannot survive when love is constantly conditional on improvement. Edward should grow. He should become more independent. He should understand the responsibilities of living with children. He should create his own structure and identity in America. But growth is not the same as reconstruction. Marissa must decide whether she wants Edward to develop or whether she wants him replaced by a version she designed. That is what makes Edward's character arc so interesting. At first, he seemed grateful. He saw the comfortable home, the new opportunity, and the possibility of building a family with Marissa. Over time, that gratitude has started turning into self-respect. He is realizing that a beautiful house does not make emotional neglect acceptable. Financial comfort cannot replace affection. And moving to America does not mean he must accept constant criticism. Marissa's emotional arc appears to be moving in the opposite direction.